Hey everyone. So today's guest is Harrison Tinsley. You may have heard of him. He's been in the news for some issues involving his son, where Harrison fought for custody, and we'll get into all of this. But suffice it to say that today's episode actually involves some issues that might be controversial, which is the issue of children and trans ideology. And so I just want to share with you before the video starts, because there are some comments and some conversations where you might be kind of asking yourself, like, well, what is Chloe really saying here? Or, what is her position on this? And so I just want to make it clear so there's no questions. I personally think it is absolutely fine for an adult to wear whatever clothes they want to wear. I'm not the clothing police. To marry and be with whoever they want to be with. I don't, object to people living their own independent adult lives, doing what makes them happy in that way. But as a clinician, I do have some issues when we start telling people that, say, to a man, if you tell him, hey, if you have a breast augmentation and you have a cosmetic surgery on your genitals to make them appear more like the external look of a female genital, it's not the same as actually becoming a woman, right? It's not literally the same. You don't become a woman that way. And I think especially when we're dealing with children, we have to be super careful, because children display what Piaget called magical thinking. So Piaget was this incredible developmental psychologist, and he would look at children. In fact, maybe it wasn't Piaget, maybe it was various psychologists have noted and looked at the way that children have incredible imaginations. They can engage in this magical thinking where, they can think that they're a unicorn. They can think all kinds of things. And so when we start telling them as, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10-year-olds that they can, quote, become the opposite sex, they'll take it in a very concrete, literal way, which, I just honestly don't truly believe is possible. When we look at the science, my way of following the science is really looking at biology and about male and female, and I view those in a traditional sense, insofar again as chromosomes and biological characteristics, and I look less at what cosmetic procedures or hormonal manipulations a person may have done to mimic the hormonal levels of somebody of the opposite sex. I, as a woman, of course, am much more than my hormone levels, much more than what psychologists and other scientists call secondary sex characteristics. Those are the external parts. And just one other piece of this I want to share is about intersex, so whether we call it, intersex issues or disorders of sexual development, there's all kinds of different, terms for it. But I will say I personally have worked with, as clients, people that were actually born, with secondary sex characteristics that didn't necessarily match their chromosomes. And that's a tough situation, no doubt. But that is not the same as being trans. So in fact, for those people, it was actually really important for them to be understood and known as saying, hey, I'm a female. I may have, certain exterior presentations that look a certain way, but I am a female. And knowing their chromosomes and knowing their biology inside, was really important to them. Just in the same way that humans are biped animals, right? We have 2 legs. There might be humans that are born sometimes with only 1 leg, but that doesn't change the general structure of the fact that humans are, bipeds. So anyway, you may or may not agree with everything I said, and that is 100% fine. But I just wanted to be open with you about my own personal views again, which are that, hey, people can dress however they want. They can love whoever they want. But that doesn't change, the truth and the biology about, what a person is. And I actually think it's doing a medical disservice to people if we lie and tell them, hey, if you take this medication or you have this surgery, you're going to, scientifically change, into the opposite sex. I guess the only other caveat that I hear about this sometimes is about the difference between, sex and gender, and that sex is your biology and gender is, your outward expression of yourself. And I can buy into that, even to be honest, have some questions about it, because I feel like it's implying that as a woman of a female sex, that if I want to start displaying traditionally masculine behaviors, that somehow means that my gender isn't female, that I'm somehow not female across the board. And I personally, believe that I am, no matter what I wear and no matter how I present myself, that I'll always be a woman. But I'm open and I'm flexible to the point where if a person wants to say that they recognize that biology is what it is, and you're born a male, you're going to be a male forever. You're born a female, you're going to be a female forever. And you can, if you want to call it, play with your gender, meaning present yourself as something socially constructed to be different than what your biology actually is. Again, as I just said, I don't personally have a problem with that. It's a free country. But when it comes to telling children that they can change sex, I actually personally think that's doing a disservice to them. That's just my view. So anyway, I hope that you enjoy the episode.
Hello.
Hi, Harrison. It is so good to meet with you. Thanks for meeting with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to meet you, Chloe.
Yeah, so I know obviously like time always flies by, so I want to jump right into things, So I want to just quickly recap your situation for people that don't know, and obviously then you can tell me if there's, anything that I got wrong. Um, but you are a father to a wonderful little boy named Sawyer, and Sawyer's only approximately about 4 years old, but his mom got pregnant during a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship between the two of you. And while mom was pregnant, she began posting on Facebook about, I'll love you whether you're a boy or a girl. So there was something even before born, that there was some kind of a thought about this issue. And then mom now identifies as a lesbian, non-binary, though obviously I imagine that when you impregnated her, that she was, obviously you're a man, she's open to men at that time, so maybe she went through a change. But anyway, she got pregnant during your relationship, and then she abruptly ended the relationship before she gave birth. And then you just learned through Facebook that she was starting to label the child as trans potentially. And then you fought for custody, even just for the ability to know the child, not even necessarily trying to strip custody. But you didn't even get to meet the child until Sawyer was 15 months old. Is this all correct so far? Because it sounds hard to believe, right?
Yeah, that's a good summary of it, actually. And basically, I found out he was born about a week after from someone reaching out to me on social media and telling me. And then from there, I came up with a plan and I filed all this paperwork. It took a while. And 2 months after he was born, I filed in court. And it took 13 months after that big filing just to meet him.
Wow. Now, Harrison, when I heard about your story in the news, I just sort of imagined an older man. You know what I mean? Like there's something about the whole story about, because I didn't know all those background details at the time. I just, heard in the news there's a man that has won a court case where the mother was trying to trans the kid, and the man sued in court and he prevailed. I just in my mind pictured an older man that would have the wherewithal or even the values, or whatever it is, to go that route. How do you mind sharing, how old are you?
Yeah, I'm 32 years old, but I just have a fire that I have to be the best at I can be and fight for Sawyer no matter what. It's never an option to give up. Lots of people even told me like, oh, maybe you should just give up. Like family court's not fair to dads in court and all sorts of stuff. But I never wavered. I always knew it was the right thing to do and what I had to do.
Yeah, family court is not fair to dads. I agree. So you were 27 when all of this began?
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I I guess I'm wondering, I'm looking over some of my notes here of questions that I had for you. Um, so you, from what I understand, went on actually to marry another woman, correct? And I guess
Right.
then my question is, I have so many questions, but part of what I like to do on this show is highlight people that have gone through or done really incredible things and look at the coping strategies and, just ways of personal resources that they use to get through all of this. So how did you learn to trust women again? Because if I were you and I went through that, it'd be very hard to trust a woman again.
Yeah. I mean, obviously that's like a fear and doubt that you have, scared of something bad happening again. But the reality is you have to fight through it. I did a lot of exercise, a lot of reading, I listen to music. I make music even, so it really means a lot to me and helps me get through things. But you just have to dig deep inside yourself and realize that if you never, put yourself out there and you're never brave again, then you'll never find love again. And sure, you risk having your heart broken, but you also have the chance of finding something beautiful and incredible. And I
Yeah.
feel so blessed and thankful. And yeah, it's always been really important to me to like have my own family and like little love of my life. And it's just always been a dream of mine. So I wasn't going to let any fear or doubt stop me from going for that.
Yeah. No, that's great that you didn't let the fear stop you. But my guess is that you also let the experience inform you, right? Because from what I understand, when you were and tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, I'm calling you boyfriend,
Yeah.
girlfriend, and I know that she ended the relationship abruptly when she was pregnant, but that doesn't mean that you were necessarily truly boyfriend, girlfriend. It could have been like hookup partners or whatever. I don't
No, we
know.
were we were like dating, boyfriend, girlfriend.
Okay. So you were boyfriend, girlfriend, and from what I've heard in your previous interviews, and sorry, by the way, one other like little bit of background I just want to share for anyone listening is again that this mother started hinting at trans issues from the time that the baby was in utero and appears to have been actually really pushing a trans ideology identity on the child. For example, she took him to Disney World and would not let him ride on any of the rides unless he wore the princess shoes. So I think many of us may even have different opinions. For example, if you have a child that's, you know, expressing a wish to be the opposite gender, and there's different ways people have of thinking about that. But in this situation, the child was actually objecting, and the mom was really trying to kind of impose this on the child. So I think all of us can agree, that would not be right. So anyway,
I have
you
two
were,
things to say to that
no,
really quick. I
please,
mean, the
please.
first one is, yeah, Sawyer's always adamantly said he's a boy. He gets upset if you say anything else. He's never bought into it, and I'm so thankful for that. And I'm so thankful to have been able to be there for him, to guide him and love him, and just that he never bought into it. I think that, children are very observant, and it's really clear to them, the difference between boys and girls, and it's sort of the most beautiful difference we have in this world is how we work together. But the other thing is I'm not sure that even if your child was expressing, doubts about their gender or curiosity about this gender stuff, that would be appropriate to play into anyways, because they also express things like as I'm Spider-Man. You don't take them to top of the buildings in New York and be like, okay, swing to the next one. They say like I'm a pirate. You don't, chop their leg off or poke their eye out and put an eye patch. But for this one thing, we are actually playing into what kids say and even going as far as to give them puberty blockers that are irreversible and even do surgeries where they remove healthy body parts from kids. And I don't really think that's okay in any context.
No, I actually agree with you, Harrison, personally. But I just wanted to say that there might be people listening that see things differently. And so, in the interest of trying to find common ground with our everybody's listeners, I think that probably we can all agree um, that a child who's actually specifically saying I'm not trans, definitely, I
Yeah.
mean, doesn't need to be put into that. But as a clinical psychologist, I actually agree with you that there's different ways of handling gender dysphoria. And just like we don't collude with an anorexic's false belief that they are underweight,
Yeah.
we try to help them to understand and love the body that they're in. I think that should be extended, as well. So, but nevertheless, even if people see that issue differently, we can all agree that if a child is saying, hey, like I'm a boy, that there's something really strange for that boy child to have, a parent saying, no, in fact, that you're a girl. So since you did go on to marry again, or marry again, I should marry for the first time, but to partner again and marry, um, I get that you didn't allow fear to stop you, but we do allow past experiences to inform our behavior. And so I was just curious because I know when you were dating Sawyer's mom, you've described that you knew that she had a different political ideology than you, but that you didn't care. You said, whatever, she can be one way, I can be another politically, and we can just be together and we love each other, and that's fine. And frankly, I think that's beautiful. But what, on the other hand, when people are partnering and having kids together and establishing a life together, there can actually be an importance of having common values. So I was just wondering when you went through the next round of getting married, again, first marriage, but next round at partnership, how was your approach different? Did you do premarital like questions, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, we definitely align on all of our values and political ideas, and she's just absolutely incredible. And I just felt so divine when I met her. The chances of it were just so unlikely, and it's just, yeah, I mean, she's just a wonderful human that we sort of have the same goals and values and want the same things for our family and kids, and it's just that's definitely a much healthier, um, just positive relationship to align on those things. I'd highly recommend searching for that.
Yeah, so you said it was unlikely. I actually work with a lot of people. One of my books is Dr. Chloe's 10 Commandments of Dating. So people
Yeah.
always want to know how to meet the one. How did you do it?
Well, I always send it. So I live by the motto, be brave. And, I was in Arizona at Turning Point USA. I had done an interview with Charlie Kirk. And then that was in the morning. And so I was just hanging out at Turning Point USA all day, like sort of hanging out with the film guys that I know and walking around all day and helping them a little. And I just saw this girl and I thought she was so beautiful. And I saw her in her office and I guess I just flipped my hair and I walked right in her office and I told her she's incredibly beautiful and I just talked to her for like an hour and laughed with her and she ended up being in California 2 weeks later and we went on our first date and the rest is history. It was just
Wow, that's
just have to
awesome.
send it.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So back to my list of questions though that I had prepared for this, which is from what I've heard in your previous interviews, although you have full physical custody, your um, ex, Sawyer's mother, if she calls herself that, I guess, I don't know, what does she call herself if
She
she's
she
not,
does. She
okay,
calls herself something like that. Yeah.
she calls herself his mother, okay, even though she's non-binary. I wasn't sure how that would work. Um,
I'm not sure if that changes or how that works, but yeah.
okay, so since you have full physical custody, how often does she see or the mother see Sawyer? Is that in your control? And how, if she does see Sawyer, how do you handle telling Sawyer the truth while seeming not to trash his mom? Because I know, like, on any subject, whenever there's conflict between the parents that are no longer together, it's always a balance between wanting to, like, tell your child the truth, but also not trash your ex. But what if your ex is actually toxic? How do you walk that line? Fill us in, Harrison.
Yeah, well, she sees him twice a week and not overnight and not alone. Someone else will always be there. And I think that's a great, there's some other safety precautions that I won't go into detail about as well. But so that makes me more comfortable with it. And as far as, I don't ever say anything bad about his mom to him. I don't think it would do any good. Um, I just sort of tell him the truth and that I love him. He's a boy. He'll always be a boy. And he doesn't seem to worry about that stuff
But
anymore,
what if
really.
he says to you, but mom says
Sure.
I'm a girl? Like, how do you
Hmm.
walk that line between like, well, mom's wrong? And I mean, because
Yeah.
I don't know the right answer. I'm truly trying to like learn from you because I know that this is a hard topic between parents, whether it's about trans or any other issue.
Well, so like in that hypothetical case, right? He would already know that's not true, and I would just simply tell him, "Well, buddy, you're a boy, just like your dada. You're always gonna be a boy. It can never change." I would tell him like, "Look, I'm a boy. I'm always gonna be a boy. Your grandpa's a boy, always gonna be a boy. Your friend is a boy, always gonna be a boy." And I would just show him examples of people that are boys and how that never changes. And, I wouldn't like be like, she's a liar or like anything weird like that. I would just be like, it's just simply untrue and you're a boy and you'll always be a boy. And it's good to, be thankful for what you are, which is a beautiful, brave boy.
Right. So he's 4.5 now.
Hmm.
I'm guessing that as he gets older, he'll become more cognitively sophisticated. So, like, and everybody has this, by the way. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Like, there's already issues, just about me and my life, for example, that I think about. Okay, my 7-year-old one day might get older and ask me some pointed questions about X, Y, or Z. And I wrestle with, like, how I might answer them. So I'm not at all trying to like I'm truly trying to like learn from you because again, I'm truly so impressed that at such a young age that you've had this incredible fortitude, not only to simply fight for custody in the first place. Like we have such an absence of fathers, I think, right now in our society, much less to fight for this in such an uphill battle. And in such tough circumstances. So, this I'm not trying to be aggressive, but I do want to dig deep. And so I'm
I'm happy to
curious.
share. And
Thank you.
I don't necessarily, I do think it's unfortunate that, so many fathers are outside the home. That's clearly not working out well for children and their success in life. But I don't believe the narrative that it's just a bunch of dads just bailing. It seems more likely to me that the family court system is so unfair, that, a lot of these dads are really getting screwed in court and they end up being like their kid's uncle to see them once a month and pay a bunch of money. And it's really not fair. And there's no stats to prove. There's actually stats to the contrary, but there's no stats to prove that a kid should default go with the mother. And so I think we should need to kind of reconsider that idea and really do what's best for children and follow the actual data on these sorts of things.
I 100% agree. I do. So the pressing question then is, as Sawyer gets older and kind of presses back to you a little bit more, just even sincerely, as he's intellectually trying to square this, if he says, okay, like I get it, you're saying I'm going to always be a boy, but mom says that I'm a girl. Does that make mom wrong? Like, what do you do in that situation? Have you thought about that?
Well, fortunately, I don't think he would ever believe that. I mean, he really has it instilled in him. I think he's kind of a rebel like me. He doesn't just buy what he's told
Yeah,
and likes to ask questions and things, which is great. Um, so I don't particularly see that happening. But again, if that does happen, I mean, yeah, I would just have to tell him like, well, your mommy's wrong about that one, buddy. Like, you're a boy, you always be a boy. You can't change that. And maybe sometimes people get confused or want to change that, but the reality is that's something we can never change. And it's something that we should, thank God for that we are a boy and how amazing that is. And look at how all the cool things we get to do because we're boys. And
totally, totally. I just want you to know I'm actually like I think I'm rather aligned with your viewpoint. I just try to kind of think about things from the other
Mhm.
side. But yeah, I mean, as a clinical psychologist, the training that I had even was about the importance of, say, psychology and medical studies, including women, because our biology is so distinctly different that it was unethical to ignore it when we were looking at, say, clinical trials for drugs and things like that. And so obviously,
Interesting.
you know what I mean? Like, so women are
Yeah,
obviously different, and not including us in certain clinical trials was actually seen as an ethical failure in the past, you know? And so now what are we supposed, I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked with that, but
it sounds
anyway,
interesting to be honest with you.
yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, I do find it interesting. But so for people as well, maybe even specifically that are going through what you specifically went through, um, my understanding is that you prevailed in court, ironically, not because of this trans issue, but because of your ex an issue of felony child endangerment. I won't go into all the details. I read some online, but that it was something that really had nothing to do with this issue. And so, although you prevailed, unfortunately, and please tell me if I'm wrong, unfortunately, your case is actually not a story of a father who prevailed in a fight over trans issues. It was a fight over trans issues that got won on a separate issue. Is that right?
So there's a lot more to it than that, actually.
Please.
That
Yeah.
that child endangerment and 5150 was a long time ago. It was when
Mm.
Sawyer was 20 months old and I had just started half custody. And that actually did not change custody, but that's how this all goes down. And to be clear too, I did bring up the gender stuff and asked the court to rule on it this entire time. So I do think it is part of it. I would also say that anyone that tries to force these, gender ideologies and abstract ideas onto children clearly has some underlying mental health issues, in my opinion,
Amen.
because that's not a normal thing to try to talk to kids about.
Hmm.
They're just like, oh, cars, football, hockey, fireworks, dogs. Like they're not into stuff like that. It doesn't make any sense to talk to them about that. But yeah, so that event you mentioned took place, and I started noticing like all this weird non-binary stuff she was trying to do, and like in the Disneyland story, and I got a temporary restraining order because his mom was harassing and defaming me with unspeakably horrible and untrue things about me. And so I got this restraining order. Even on the restraining order, I asked for the gender stuff to stop. And I got this big trial. It ended up being a 5-day trial, just a long time for family court to give you
Hmm.
all this evidence, right, from the child endangerment, the gender stuff, the restraining order, etc. And they kept custody 50-50. And it was at that point that I felt really devastated because I thought the trial was so one-sided, and it was like I had to do something. I'd spent all of my money in the world to try to fight in court. It's so expensive for attorney fees. And then I decided I was going to tell my story and just see where that took me. And I'm super thankful that it sort of blew up. And I just did every interview I could. And I went to the Capitol to fight the crazy anti-parent bills in California, and fight back against the gender stuff even in Capitol Hill. And then when this new event took place, it ended up awarding me full custody. I of course brought up the gender stuff to everyone involved, and actually the family court didn't give me custody. They denied my ex parte on another violent incident, which is actually far worse than that first incident. And it was CPS in San Francisco, California, that 100% did their job, stood up for child safety and best interest, put politics aside, and like literally did a really thorough investigation and proved that they did not care about politics and that they cared about children. It's very impressive because you hear all these horror stories about CPS, but they were really the heroes in this case in San Francisco, California. So I just really think they deserve credit for what they did because it was incredible. And the mom tried to bring politics into it and lies about me and everything. And they really did their job. And I'm just super thankful.
Yeah. So do you feel like the media spotlight helped to pressure San Francisco CPS to realize like, hey, we can't just
That's
jerk this guy around or
That's definitely a possibility. And I did let them know that if anything happened to Sawyer, that I would seek, um, you know, litigation against them because
yeah.
it was the third time they had been contacted about him, none of which were by me. by the way. So
Well, it's interesting again as a psychologist, when we're dealing with abuse victims, one of the first things that the abuser will try to do is to isolate the victim. And the abuser doesn't want to be seen or known. And so the more that the victim can, get accountability and get eyes on the situation, the more that it helps that person. So, not that you see yourself as a victim ever, but as you said, men can actually be victimized in the family court system quite a lot. And so the fact that you were able to get a lot of eyes on the situation, I think was actually very great that you did that. Um, how did you do that at that turning moment when you said, okay, I'm out of money. I think I better just, go to the media. Like, how does a 20-something-year-old decide that he's going to get the media on this? Like, do you mind sharing what you did?
yeah, yeah. Well, you're sitting there, you're heartbroken. You're like, wow, I finally had my chance to say what I wanted in court and show them how crazy this is and how Sawyer would be so much safer with me. How did they not? How could this happen? How would they not rule in my favor? And you're like, you just sit there and you question everything and you have all these doubts and what ifs and fears, but you're just something inside you is just burning that you have to do whatever it takes. And that if you believe and really believe and manifest it and really give it your all, that you can do anything. And you just keep that fire burning inside you. And I reached out to every possible person I could think of, and the Daily Wire ended up taking my story for whatever reason and breaking it, and Matt Walsh and I read a Lordy there, and they did this whole, I mean, they took their time, they verified everything, and then they broke my story, and I didn't know what that meant. I've never been involved in media or politics or anything, but it ended up just being a huge blessing for me. It opened up my life in so many ways, just having the courage to speak publicly in spite of that being very scary and vulnerable and terrifying. But when you have courage and do things anyways, do the right thing, no matter how scared you are, your life opens up just in ways you can't even imagine. And I've just met some of the most incredible people that are really supportive, real people, real friends. And I've been part of this movement of protecting kids and parental rights and just seeking truth, really. And it's just wild that when you have courage and do the right thing and fight for truth, like your life really opens up just in ways you can't even imagine. So I really encourage everyone to just find it within themselves to say what they believe, to fight for what they believe, to definitely fight for your kids if that's on the table. There's no one more innocent and wonderful and amazing than children. They're the future, the most vulnerable amongst us. They deserve protection. And you have to find that warrior piece of yourself, that piece of yourself that's braver and stronger than you ever knew you could be. And you have to just become it, be who you're meant to be. And don't sit back and waste your potential and always wonder what if. You have to go for it.
Yes, that's so true. It was actually my own child that prompted my own journey out of the box. So I was, living in New York City when I was 20. Well, when I was 8, I told everybody I was going to live in New York and be on television. And then when I was in my early 20s, I moved to New York and ended up getting a PhD in clinical psychology and did, a fair amount of, Inside Edition and VH1 and, good television as a psychologist. I had a pretty good life there. And then it was during COVID in 2020, I had a 3-year-old and now he's 7. But, he'd been home with my husband and me for most of his life, well, all of his life, but we had planned that year of 2020 in the fall that he would start a preschool when he was going to be turning 4 because it was the right time we felt for him to begin, group socializing in that way. And of course, with COVID, the director of the school we had planned for him said, he's going to have to wear a mask, and everybody around him will wear a mask, and all these things. And I was like, oh, as a psychologist, I said, I just that's going to be his first experience out of the home. Nobody can see his face and he can't see anybody else's face. And like that's what's going to be at 3 years old, 3.5, oh. And but at the same time, we couldn't continue to keep him home because the lockdowns were so intense. Like even going to the grocery store, people were like double glove, double, it was like a post-apoc I never can say that word, a post-apocalyptic scene, whatever. But yeah, I never ever imagined I was going to like leave New York. But that was it. I remember just like
Wow.
practically hyperventilating and telling my husband, we have to get out of here. We have to leave. And I wrote this blog about the harms of masking children. And I was like, why is nobody else talking about this? Like, there's self-esteem issues. Like, if adults don't respond to their smiles or frowns, but they're rather pre-verbal still, like, how will that affect their identity? Of course, everyone talks about the language issues. Like, there's so many issues. Um, and so I was like, how come nobody else is talking about this? And so I sent the article to some colleagues first. And I said, am I like missing something obvious here? Because I don't want to embarrass myself, like why is nobody else like it's just some duh moment that I'm going to have right after I hit the publish button. And my colleagues gave me the honest response. They said, no, 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 everything in your article is correct. It all makes sense, from the scientific perspective, but we really discourage you from publishing it. And I said, why? And they said, because it could discourage people from masking their children. And I was like, okay, this makes no sense. Like they're agreeing with my article that masking children seems to be a harmful idea, but they're discouraging me from sharing it because it could just, people might not mask their kids. So we up and left, like seriously, within 30 days, like we moved to Florida. And after I got here, and I shared that article and I started, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, Jack Posobiec, all these people like retweeted it. And I started, I went on the Tim Pool show, like all these things started happening. Um, and I started to, that was why the next kind of wave of writing I did, and I'm still into it, is about the mental health benefits of free speech, of exactly what you were saying about just the importance of saying what you believe and standing up for what you believe. It connects to the right kind of cognitive elaboration, like we think more clearly and we're less vulnerable to groupthink and all these things. Anyway, I don't want to go on a total sidebar about it, but I wanted to tell you that I really agree with just what you're saying about that when you have something that's really troubling you, it's important to stand up for it. And you talked about that like every fiber of your being feeling. And I just wanted to say as well, the healthy function of anxiety is to stimulate preparation behaviors. And the healthy function of anger is to stimulate boundary setting behaviors. And so in both cases, you might have been feeling anxiety and you might have been feeling anger. And in both cases, you channeled it into some really constructive behavior. You didn't just say, well, I'm going to go get into bar fights. You said, well,
Right.
I'm going to get into legal fights. I'm going to fight not only for my son, but for the legal system everywhere. I mean, what prepared you for this, Harrison? How did you end up responding to such an adverse situation in such a powerful way? Like, do you have any sense of like what your biggest challenge in life was before this, or like what your parents taught you about life? Like, how did you get to handle the situation in this way?
Well, I always grew up a rebel, and I think that I've just always been the eternal optimist, Mr. Brightside. I've always had that in me, always see the glass just completely full and always believe I could do anything. I think my parents helped instill that in me, but I just feels like something that if there's one gift I have, it's just always been just this Mr. Brightside attitude about everything. And I just always believe I can do anything and just to see the positive in life. And I think that something about that and who I am just really gave me the ability to handle this situation.
Right. Well, amazing. So I just have a few more questions for you. And then, obviously, if there's anything that I haven't asked you and you want to share it, by all means, you've got the floor. But just a few other questions I had for you. I'm curious, I know that you're a musician, so by all means, if you want to give a shout out to whatever is the best way for people to listen to your music and anything else that you want to share. But I'm curious how, if at all, how has this affected you in the music industry? Because I feel like in general in the arts, it's a very left-leaning space. I say this as somebody, as I said, in New York City that does television, like it's
Yeah.
pretty, militant in the ways of the viewpoints that are allowed. So has this affected you in the music industry and or in your day-to-day life? And one third kind of one to throw in there is, have you ever changed anyone's mind about this issue?
So as far as music goes, I love writing songs and putting songs out there. It's not like my career, so to speak, but I love it. I'm always going to do it. I've faced no backlash. I mean, there's a song I wrote, Sawyer, called It's a Boy, that I submitted to California Music Video Awards, and it got something for it. So they clearly didn't care about politics at all, even though it's San Francisco based. And in my everyday life, I tend to just meet all sorts of incredible people in the Bay Area, California, and all of them think that, you know, there should be no parent secrets kept from parents at schools. All of them think that there should be no boys and girls sports, and all of them think that children can't consent to puberty blockers and surgeries that do irreversible damage. That's what I notice. I've definitely changed some people's minds on some issues. Um, I'm always happy to speak to people that don't agree to me, and I also just think I my story really brings hope to a lot of people, and I'm so thankful for that. And there's nothing that's better than uplifting other people, honestly.
Totally. Yeah. Sorry, I know I said those were all my last questions, but I one more. Um, are you a person of faith or spirituality? Because I know that can be a big resource for people when they're going through hard times.
Yeah, I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and that definitely prayer and everything definitely helps get you through this sort of
Great.
stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Harrison. If there's anything more that you want to share, you've got the floor, or if you just want to tell people how they can follow you and learn more, or as you said, if there's people that uh, want to have a discussion, or maybe they think differently, or whatever, like what's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Harrison Tinsley on all social media and check out my music or message me about politics or going through family court. I'd love to respond to anyone. I really means a lot to me that so many people have supported me in Sawyer. It's honestly just incredible and mind-boggling that so many people are that kind. I have a Give Send Go / Saving Sawyer to help for attorney fees and things with Sawyer. I'm working on starting a nonprofit called Courage for Kids to help families in this sort of situation. And, I just really think that right now is this time, this moment in history where we're making a difference. This gender ideology stuff's going to stop. I think just like it's stopping in Europe, you see it right now with the cast files, et cetera. A bunch of countries are banning it. Some states are banning it.
Can you
And
say what the CAS files are for people that might not know?
yeah, so it's a big like study out of England from a lady with the last name Cass, I think. And basically she went into the study on the pro side of sort of transing kids or hormones or puberty blockers and stuff. That was sort of like their baseline. But as they studied it all and searched it all in really great number in detail, they found out that, wow, this really isn't working and it's actually doing more harm than good. And so they reluctantly actually put that truth out there, which is very brave and noble of them. And, it sort of was like the startup of stopping child transition in any way in Britain. And it's just been an incredible thing to see because they went into it, trying to prove the opposite and the truth prevailed. And the truth's going to prevail here too. This stuff's going to end in the United States, and we're going to all have to look back and say what we did in this time. If we spoke the truth, if we stood up for the children, our grandchildren, and I'm prepared, to do whatever it takes to save the kids. And I just know that in this battle, this war on children, like it's it's the correct side to fight for innocence and to fight for truth and for love. There's boys and girls, and I really think kids deserve just to be innocent and to be loved.
I agree. I mean, and just to like rest in the truth. I mean, as a psychologist, one of the most important and fundamental aspects of mental health is a grip upon reality, right? So, like, we think about mental health disorders oftentimes as being on a spectrum from psychotic to borderline to neurotic. And psychotic means a break with reality. Borderline is like you're generally in touch with reality, but you also have these like wild, incredible mood swings that are often driven by beliefs that are kind of outside of reality. Like you and I are relating and we're getting along fine. And then just suddenly for a few days, I feel like you're my worst enemy and I go off on a thing and then I come back. And so that's the borderline type sometimes in a nutshell. And then the neurotic is what I call like your everyday New Yorker, you know? And so I just think that by undermining a child's sense of reality about this basic truth about, you know, boys and girls. I mean, in fact, I even looked up the etymology like of the word wife and it goes back to the word woman. And you know, it's and even the root of the word woman is it goes back so far that it's apparently hard to trace, you know, like because it's just been such a basic, you know, known for such a
Yeah.
long time. And so I agree that it's counterproductive, but it's so incredible. And I'm embarrassed that it's honestly a lot of psychologists, it's people in my field that are the worst offenders. And you know, you use the term irreversible damage. You might know the book by Abigail Shrier called Irreversible Damage. Great book about the trans issues. And so Abigail, as you may know, wrote another book called Bad Therapy, which is another excellent book. And it's all about essentially like the harms that a bad therapist can cause by, you know, dragging out or magnifying a minor incident into a major trauma in somebody's mind, sometimes all for the purpose essentially of stringing them along to pay a lot of money to that therapist, consciously or
Yeah.
unconsciously. Sometimes might be, or that the therapist has like a savior complex or whatever. So anyway, I wrote into the a listserv about this book of psychologists. Of it's a pretty, you know, good listserv of educated and um, you know, successful psychologists. And it was almost stupid, to be honest, because I've basically stopped participating in most psychologist listservs because I've come to realize that like they just don't see life the way I do, and they're just gonna mislabel me in all kinds of ways, and I just in order to manage my own energy, like I've generally try to just stop participating in what I feel is not a true discussion. But I couldn't help myself. I wrote into the listserv in good faith, and I was like, "Hey, has anybody seen this book, Bad Therapy by Abigail Shrier? It's so good. I wonder if anybody here has thought about any of these issues." And within 30 minutes, probably less. I got several replies on the thread saying that people would never even consider reading that book because it's by that transphobe Abigail Shrier because of her you know, book Irreversible Damage. And I've been fighting the urge to write in there again now. This is months ago, and so I've been fighting the urge to write in again now about, as you said, the case studies and the fact that now the United States is a total outlier for continuing, you know, these gender mutilation surgeries on kids and for telling girls and boys that they can literally change gender, not that they can just do a crude approximation visually of the opposite sex, but that they'll never actually be the opposite sex and that they won't even actually really look or sexually function like the opposite sex. That that the United States is the only place that's still telling these ridiculous lies to kids. And the Cass study, as you said, is proof of that. You know, I don't know of another nation that's on our level in terms of advancement that is still perpetuating these insane lies, not only upon kids, but upon the parents. And I feel almost the worst for parents because you know, I know how to answer back as a clinical psychologist. If somebody were to try to tell me that about my child, I would know how to answer back and I'd feel confident doing it. But I feel really bad for parents that don't know how to answer back. And so some psychologists telling them, would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son or
Yep.
whatever? And they honestly don't know and they're getting emotionally blackmailed. And so I truly feel bad for them. So with that, Harrison, I guess I'm just gonna, I keep saying one more question, but um, I feel like wonderful people like Abigail Shrier have taken the lead on that, and I'm so thankful to her. And Jordan Peterson has done great things. the reason I haven't spoken out more about it myself is because I just, and again, to be honest, as I'm speaking to you, I feel a little silly for saying this because, as you said, this is the time that people should be brave and speak up. But I guess I just honestly didn't feel like my voice would really matter because there's so many other like, bigger, louder, more important voices that are saying this. But I don't know. Like you're, to be honest, I think a lot more of an expert on this domain, obviously, than I am. Uh, if you were going to suggest to me as a psychologist, like what I can or should do, what should I do?
Well, first of all, Abigail's books are both phenomenal, and I'd encourage anybody to read them, as well as Jordan Peterson's work. But I would say I'm just a normal California guy, with long hair and my skinny jeans, and no one would ever think that I would be a voice that would matter, that would make a difference. But here I am, and I really think that your voice does matter, Chloe, and that when you do speak up and when you do post on those psychologist forums, I really think you can make a difference. I think it takes every single one of us, every single person is affecting the universe, changing a million different ways of miracle frequency. And you got to believe in yourself that you can make a difference because we all can. And it starts with you. You got to change yourself and be courageous yourself. And once you do that, you'll uplift other people. You'll get a couple psychologists to see the truth. You'll get a couple people to be brave also, finally speak what, the truth is to them, what they believe. And you'll just see that the more and more you do it, the more and more it happens.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I
a
totally
ripple
agree.
effect.
Yeah. Again, that's why I'm pushing right now about free speech and mental health and why it's just so important to speak out with Harrison. So thank you for that encouragement. I bet you didn't know I was going to try to ask you for advice today. I didn't even
You're
know I was
welcome.
going to, but thank you. So one more time, like what's the best way? Like if you can, like we'll post some links, but in case people are listening but not on their screen, what's some good links for them to try when they have a moment?
Just look up Harrison Tinsley on any social media or Google or anything. You'll find me. And I have a Give Send Go / Saving Sawyer
Okay.
and starting up Courage for Kids. But yeah, it's easy to find me. And I appreciate all of you so much.
Awesome. Well, Harrison, thanks again for taking the time to speak with me today. It was really uplifting.
Thank you. Thank you for
Take
having
care.
me.
Thanks. Bye.